Hey everybody, this is Michele.
And this is Julie.
Welcome to A Blonde, a Brunette, and a Mic podcast. What is our podcast all about, you ask?
Well, we're two 50-something women with life experience and, plenty to say.
Which is exactly what we're going to do right now. Do you recognize that song?
It's from someone who is very frustrated that no one seems to be paying attention to what they have to say.
It's probably why he wrote it.
Yeah.
It's actually a song from the 70s, 1972, by Todd Rundgren. Just thought I'd throw that in there since we're playing a little bit of it, but it does have to do with our topic today.
Was he a one-hit wonder?
Probably.
Yeah, because I've never heard that name before.
You've heard the song, though.
Oh, yeah, I've heard the song.
Those one-hit wonders, that's how it always is. It's like, you know the song, but never really heard of the artist.
Yeah, there's been a few of those out there. Well, we are here to talk today a little bit about listening and being heard.
And the idea of or paying attention to either when you're being talked over or are you talking over other people.
And maybe some tips and tricks on how to combat that problem or to put yourself in a better position, when you're trying to get your point across.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, when I was putting this research together, I thought this was kind of funny, or I don't say funny, but just kind of interesting, I guess, is that according to Deborah Hill, who is an author on In Her Site, Power Play. It's a blog. She said that men interrupt 33% more when speaking with a woman as opposed to speaking with a man. And I thought that was so interesting. Do you think that's maybe because as women, we're not necessarily coming to the conversation with that same level of confidence at times?
I think it was probably like that earlier in this generation. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Years ago, I think it was probably more like that than it is now.
Yeah.
So I think definitely women are more aware of the power of their voice and being heard.
Which is such a cool thing that we can even get to that point where we're saying that, because I think it's definitely an acquired skill that you don't always learn. I mean, I was going to share some thoughts from being in the corporate world, and definitely some of the things that I learned from that. Get into that a little bit later. But people have different personality traits. Some are better listeners. Some are horrible listeners and can't wait till you finish your sentence because they have a rebuttal response or they have the thought in their head. And so they really aren't listening to what you have to say. They're more preparing what they want to say in return.
They're thinking about it and ready to say it before they're not even really listening to the whole context maybe of what the other person is talking about.
Right.
And when you mention personality traits, so I'm thinking of impatient, somebody that's impatient, having that type of a personality trait just in general. Impatient, maybe somebody that's always in a hurry, so they're not really listening. Somebody maybe that has an aggressive personality.
You just kind of described me a little bit. Except the aggressive
not
part.
Not the aggressive part.
Yeah, I don't think
always in a hurry and just like on to the next, not really listening.
Thank you, next. I know. Well, I was notorious for that. I think that it was something that I was constantly working on because it's back to trying to fit too many things into your day, but not listening to someone really, and it could be cultural, it could be something about just the way you were raised or the type of atmosphere that you were in. If you had a really large family, you might look at things a little bit differently than if you were in a smaller family or if you were an only child or something.
I mean, being the youngest of 8, I was always trying to be heard.
Yeah.
And I never really felt like I was.
So, I mean, you're like raising your hand going, what about me?
Just always lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a really common thing with larger families.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Just very task oriented, and you kind of have to be.
Yeah. So this topic, when we're naming it, is Hello Walls, because that was what my dad would say when he would be really irritated that we were not listening to what he was saying. Like we could be at the dinner table having a conversation or something, and my sister and I, or my mom and my sister and I, or whatever, and my dad's over there going, "Hello Walls, does anybody have time to listen to what I have to say?" And we'd look at him
he
like
feeling ignored.
I think he was, or like
trying to get your attention.
I was out with some clients / friends, and I was talking. I think I mentioned this before. I was talking with one of the people in the group and having a really great conversation just about what he was doing and all these kinds of things. And the dad says, "I'm bored," because he wasn't involved in the conversation. He was just sitting at the other end of the table bored, going, "I'm bored. Let's talk about something else." Basically, I'm not involved in that conversation, so let's involve me in something else.
Right.
And I thought it was kind of cute, actually, because it's probably the way it is at home. But it took me off guard a little bit. I went, okay,
wanting some attention.
Wanted a little bit of attention. I think that was definitely what was going on there. But
of course, I'm thinking now about what I was saying about being the youngest of 8, and even that example that you just talked about, and wanting the attention and doing something or saying something that maybe you wouldn't do or say otherwise unless you were trying to get that attention. So I'm thinking of children when they're acting out also. That's
throwing things or
that's their way of, is anybody paying attention to me? Is anybody? And when you think about it, I think a lot of times as parents, taking the time to listen to children as well, so that they feel heard, will help eliminate a lot of that acting out.
Well, they won't feel, like nobody's paying attention.
I don't know what they're saying. I don't know why children just came to mind for me, but yeah, it just made me think about that. So,
well, I can think of a few different times when I've had conversations with people that I will dread having a conversation with them because they don't fucking get to the point. They're just like talk in circles. And
I'm kind of like that.
No,
I can be kind of like that sometimes.
And that's why you hear me saying, so, I ask you more detailed questions about things.
Drives me crazy.
I know. Partially.
I'm talking over you.
Partially because I want to get to the root of whatever the conversation's about, but I've never really run across that or felt that way with you.
Well, but to your point, right, just what you were saying before, always in a hurry. So you're listening, but you're wanting it to go faster. And like you said, you want to get to the point. And I admit, it might not seem like I'm talking in circles, but it takes me a little bit longer to get my point across, which is why you're,
asking
trying
so
to
many
speed
questions.
asking questions so that I'll move through it. And I was like, I feel like I'm not there. I don't know. It kind of throws me off. And then I just don't know anything.
I have a very darling elderly person, I will not name names, who is like this, where you can never get a straight answer about anything, literally cannot get a straight answer. It's more like I say, you're not listening. The question is X. It's a yes or no. Yes or no. Well, blah, 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 blah. No, yes or no. You're trying to get to an answer about something and get something resolved, and you're like you're screaming hallelujah, when you finally get the yes or no answer out of this person, and then you don't know if they'll remember down the road anyway. That
could be hard sometimes to do.
Yeah. Well, she says I'm snappy with her, or that I can be impatient and snappy, and I probably can, because I get frustrated. I don't look forward to those conversations that I feel like are, like being on a merry-go-round.
Yeah.
And, obviously we're not all perfect communicators by any stretch of the imagination, myself included, but it's definitely something that has come up, certainly. Yeah. Or one other thing that I've run across, and I'm totally telling you all my secrets. I'm very guilty of this, is multitasking while you're listening, which really is kind of an oxymoron, You can't be listening and be trying to read an email or something at the same time. You're not paying attention. You're not listening. For example, for example, like I was talking to someone the other day on the phone, but they called when I was in the middle of something.
Okay, I was wondering if that's what you meant. Like not in front of them directly.
No.
But you're doing other things while you're quote unquote, these are air quotes here, people, while she's quote unquote listening to somebody talk on the phone. Well,
it was hilarious today because it came full circle in that I forgot about some of the things that were mentioned. And so today they came full circle. It's like, don't you remember we talked about blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's totally my bad, because and she's so nice about it. She didn't like get mad or anything, but I completely was not being a good listener.
Yeah.
And so it's something that you have to really concentrate on when you're when you're talking with people.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, interestingly enough, when you're talking with people that you don't know, strangers, or people that you don't know, you pay better attention. Or at least I do. It's like you're paying better attention because you don't want to be rude, or you don't want to be perceived as rude.
Yeah.
Even though they may not have a lot to say that you're interested in saying, then you gracefully bow out of the conversation. But you don't want to be disrespectful to somebody, and you could also come across as rather, I would suppose, arrogant.
Right.
If you, kind of are dismissing them, or as Michele would say, poo-pooing whatever they're saying. But I think we're all guilty of that at one point or another. So there's that.
I would have to say, as far as listening goes, well,
you're a great listener.
I feel like I'm a good listener. I usually am more so that than the talker. And so that's kind of easy for me.
But I always know when you're listening and I need to stop talking.
Because I'm saying, yeah.
And I'm like, oh God, I'm boring the hell out of her. So then I'll stop.
That's just my boring way of being engaged, because I don't want you to think that I'm not listening. So I just interject a little every once in a while, just so that I'm awake. I'm paying attention. I'm listening.
No input though.
It's because I'm a better listener than I am an inputter or a talker. That's just me.
You need to get better at that, Michele. No, I'm just kidding. Let's trade.
Yeah.
You get better at talking and I'll get better at listening,
But it's interesting because both of us recognize, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily, weaknesses, I guess, in regard to conversational things in social settings. But to your point, I guess you are engaging when it's somebody you don't know. So that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I just gave that example of talking to somebody. Yeah. And I mean, obviously that person's someone who's in my life. I'm not going to even mention who they are, but I just was not paying attention. And so when she's talking to me today about whatever plans we tentatively made, I'm like, oh shit, oops. I remember something about that, but it's totally my bad, totally my fault, because I wasn't paying attention.
This actually explains some things.
Yeah, does it?
Yeah.
I know that I'm undiagnosed with ADHD.
You think?
Oh God, without question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what all of the different things are. I just know I can't keep my head in one place or the other.
Yeah. I do know that about you.
Yeah. It does explain a lot about things. But anyway, we digress. That's not what I was talking about. We had a friend the other day tell us that we were chatting, I think it was last week or the week before, and she's like, I'm so sorry for talking over you or for interrupting you. And it was something that I had kind of noticed, but I thought, oh, I'm just being sensitive. And I didn't say anything about it. I didn't do anything. She actually was pretty self-aware. Yeah. And brought it up after
I was oblivious. I didn't even notice.
Yeah. Well, and then when you kind of go back and think about the conversation, then you go, oh yeah. So I actually did. I went back and kind of thought about the conversation. I'm like, oh, she's right. And maybe I just wasn't, it wasn't something that necessarily offended me, obviously, because I didn't do anything about it, but it was more that she maybe had a thought in her head that was going to leave and she wanted to get it out. So
why do you think, I'm going back to the 33% men statistic, that they interrupt women more when speaking? They interrupt women 33% more than they do with men. Why do you think that is?
So without sounding like a sexist feminist person, because that's not where this is coming from, my thought process on that is it has to do with how people, I really truly believe it has to do with how people are viewing others in society. And if they don't feel like a woman has the value, then they're not necessarily taking her seriously.
Right.
Now, if you kind of turn those tables and think about it from a woman's perspective, we have to own the fact that we may not be bringing a point home with someone, or we may not have the vocabulary or the ability to articulate our thoughts in a way to where it's compelling.
That's how I was when I met Rick.
Really?
8 years ago.
What do you mean?
100%.
That you just didn't know what to say? So,
it was very obvious too. I just remember one of the first. Yeah, I just remember.
Give me an example.
I just remember one of the first times that we were spending time together, and he's a very conversational person, right? So super conversational. We're looking at pictures. He's talking all about it. All of these things. Where for me, I was at a place in my life where I I didn't have that voice yet in regard to, well, and I guess it's all about confidence as well. The confidence in myself and in life or life experiences, they were so different than what his were. And so I was comparing that. And I was feeling at that time like exactly what you're saying. I didn't have important things or interesting things to contribute to the conversation.
Were you feeling like maybe I'm not well read enough to contribute to this conversation, or I don't have enough knowledge of what's going on?
Enough knowledge.
But you can totally see how that would be. I mean, if you think about being in, like going to a cocktail party, for example, at the UW, let's just say it's a bunch of people from the UW and, you know, they all have that in common and you didn't go to school there.
Right.
And they're talking about things that are not things you've been a part of. You definitely have to rethink what your conversations are going to look like.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very, unless you're careful, it's going to be very surfacey and like no depth to it.
Right.
Because you don't have the topic or experience, you know, to be able to speak up about whatever it is that the conversation's about.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of, oh yeah. Like, oh yes, red wine. Yeah, I know, I've had red wine. There's multitude of things about red wine and the oakiness and the this and the that and the barrels that they're in and all this. I don't know shit about all those things. I just know that I like the way it tastes, you know, on occasion. And so, you know, I may speak with some wine connoisseur, but I'm completely not in my element.
Well, and I think that's where you need to, now we're kind of bringing it to a different place in what we're talking about, but I think that's where you have to know how to direct yourself in a conversation as well. And this is what I've learned. You know, I was talking about how 8 years ago I wasn't that great, but I've grown a lot over the last 8 years. But when you're, to your point, what you're talking about, you need to know how to ask questions, to be intrigued by something, to engage and keep that conversation going.
Right.
Even though you don't know shit about something, you can still be talking to somebody that does and really get a lot out of it.
Well, and maybe a way to approach that in that scenario, like I gave you, was just like, I'm not really familiar with red wine, but you know, what is your favorite and why?
Right.
You could ask questions that kind of bring that person into the conversation.
Exactly.
So they get excited about telling you about something that they know about.
Right.
And, you know, and the conversation can flourish from there, I would suppose. But if you end up in a conversation like that with someone who doesn't listen, you're the person who's bringing the information to the table and they're just like looking around the room for their next, I'll stop talk. I'll just be done with the conversation, you know, if something like that happens. Cause to me, it seems very disrespectful.
Yeah.
There was not an incident.
Says the woman writing emails while talking on the phone.
Right. I'm guilty as charged. I'm sorry, young Jay. I was talking to you on the phone when I was doing that. I just outed
hilarious.
myself. Well, I'm actually much better than I used to be. I used to be pretty bad, I think.
Yeah.
Like the multitasking, I've found that if you multitask, you're really just like doing everything kind of half-assed.
Yeah.
For the most part, you know.
Unless you're a waitress.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're trying to manage a lot of different things, but it's like conversations and emails and things that really require your attention are a different animal.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
I could be talking on the phone and cooking dinner.
Yeah.
You know, have my headphones in or
100%.
putting laundry, folding laundry or doing something because it's mindless.
It's not mindless. Yeah.
It's not
activity.
Yeah. So with the talking over, you know, if you've run across people that are talking over you, what are some ways that you would maybe address something like that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that you can, a couple of different ways that you can handle that. As we were just talking about, you know, that social setting and being conversational. I was sitting here thinking about people that are the over talkers or that might even be when you're not even interjecting very much and they're still talking over you. For me, I would probably just pull back and go into ultra listening mode and just be quiet and not say very much and get out of that as soon as I could.
Because you feel like your input is not really welcome?
Not because it's not welcome, but you can tell that they're just overbearing in the conversation. You can tell that that's their personality and it's not going to really be any different. And to me, that's not very intriguing.
Yeah. The other thing that I've noticed is when you run across people that have those kinds of conversations or personalities where it becomes a little divisive, it's usually a topic that's brought up that's a controversial topic. It has to do with religion, or it has to do with politics, or it has to do with COVID vaccination, or, something like that they have a very strong opinion about.
Yeah. And you have to be able to speak with confidence in those situations.
Yeah. But again, going back to what we said before about, everybody has an opinion about something. If they completely disagree, or you completely disagree with whatever it is that they're sharing, you can still listen.
And you know what? For me, a lot of those types of conversations, when they happen, are more emotion-based versus fact-based.
Yes.
And you've heard me say this before. There are things that I don't necessarily know all the P's and Q's about all of the stuff, but I go with what my gut is telling me. Hence the emotional part of a conversation that might be a hot topic. Do you know what I'm saying?
So so let me just make sure I'm understanding. So you're saying your gut will tell you when to back off of the conversation?
Well, no, my gut, there are topics that my gut is what I go by.
Okay.
As far as decision making or whatever. And it's not necessarily fact-based all the time, 100%. And so I think sometimes those types of conversations can be difficult to maneuver because you can't necessarily speak to facts.
Yes.
When people are wanting the facts. So
think about any political issue that's going on right now that you may not be completely privy to. I mean, you may be talking to someone who watches the news 24/7 and has a very tunneled view on a specific topic, or very, very passionate about whatever it is that they're talking about, but you don't really have anything to base an opinion on. Then you ask them questions.
Yeah.
You'll ask them questions and get more information from them. But then, I mean, I've done that before, and then they say something that makes my heart go like that, and then all of a sudden I'm like not listening as much. But I don't think I don't think I don't know that that's the same, but again, it's identifying probably the type of personality of that individual. And if they are in the workplace or in everyday life, you may have a different way of approaching things.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So when I was talking about that earlier, having been in the corporate world, I found that I learned kind of the hard way, approaching things from an emotional perspective, because that's what was driving me maybe in some respects, did not fly with people who are in positions of authority that needed the facts. And so you learn that very quickly in those types of job environments. And instead of bringing what you feel to the table, you bring what you know to the table. And you have to take the emotion out of it. Otherwise, I think that leaves you kind of vulnerable. I think it's more so that way with women.
I was going to say that's probably part of the men interrupting women thing.
It absolutely 100% is.
Because women do have so much emotion, even when it's fact-based. Women, I believe, have much more of an emotional plane. With regard to
maybe more nurturing,
things,
more, like let's just say scenario is that you're talking about, you work for a corporation, you're talking about budget cuts, and you've got to cut $1 million out of your budget. Well, 90% of your budget is probably labor in most cases. So that means you're cutting people. And so that now you've got to go through that objectively to be able to make the right decisions for the company, even though the people who you might have to cut their hours on or lay off or whatever are not people, they're people you value.
It's interesting you bring that up because I actually stepped down from a position.
Really?
When I was with Nordstrom for what you just spoke about.
Because you didn't want to be the one to do it?
Well, it was changing a lot of things in how we handled labor. And so I knew I needed to get out of there before it was like too much for me to, because it for exactly that, it is just would compromise who I am personally and professionally to do some of the things that I was going to need to do.
And it is very difficult to separate those things, but I've had to do that. I've had to separate it plenty of times and be able to make really, really tough decisions and have really tough conversations. And then you go home and you feel like shit, you know, because you've towed the company line or you've done whatever you need to do for your job, which is really what you're supposed to do. We have this incredible need at times to nurture.
That's how we're made.
So
it's in our DNA.
But I wonder if that also is well, I think it is related to the fact that we are more vulnerable in a like an office or business environment. Sure. Or like we've talked about before, you know, if you had someone, let's just say I'm, you know, someone you're speaking to for a you know, at a cocktail party like we talked about before, and I'm interrupting you, or you're in let's say you're at a meeting of all the people and you're giving the meeting, right, at your office, and there's someone who's not paying attention or talking to the other people or getting up and leave, whatever. It's like, do you ignore that?
Well, that's, I think, where you have to interject and speak with confidence, make sure that they know that you value their input and what they have to say. And as soon as I'm finished giving my points, we can discuss what you've got on your mind.
Right.
And say it just like that.
Yeah.
So with this, it's making me think of, you know, this whole Kamala Harris thing. I think that this is probably one of the things that she's got going against her because she is a woman.
Yeah. And I feel
I'm
like
not saying it's right or it's wrong, but I just think it's just kind of facts.
But maybe that's what we need.
I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
But
I mean, she has, so that's the funny thing. She has to behave really, I mean, whether we like it or not, we're in a man's world when it comes to a lot of that stuff. So she has to almost behave the way that a man would to get things done, right?
Yeah.
And if she does it any other way, then like the debates that are coming up are going to be really interesting to see, because if it goes against her nature to behave in the way that you're talking about, she doesn't talk over people. I haven't experienced that. I've never had a personal conversation with her either, so I don't know. Maybe she does in real life, but she's going to have a very, very thick skin. I imagine she already does.
I was going to say well, if not, she's getting one.
Yeah, pretty quickly, because there's a lot of things that are going to come at her, and she'll have shields around her, but she has to be able to speak with the utmost of confidence and not do the whole talking in circles thing like she's been accused of doing before when she doesn't want to land on something specific. Just like any politician, you know, you kind of run across that. So, but yeah, the whole thing about being interrupted when you're talking, I think that is something that happens like in larger settings. You see that a lot of the time with people who are disagreeing but want to make their point. You know, they're arguing.
They're just over talking.
Yeah, over talking.
It's like not even interruption. They're over talking, interjecting, and it's like they want to cut you off so they can make their point. You know, and not really even hear yours.
So what if you're that person, right?
That you're the over talker?
Yeah. What if you're the interrupter? What are things that you can say to yourself? Like say you're accused of this, or the scenario where you had said, when I'm finished, I value your opinion, but you can speak and say what you want to speak. If you're the person that's being told that, it, you know, kind of puts you in your place.
Well, it is, but you need to be aware of that and choose to actively listen and just step back and pause.
So self-awareness.
Yeah.
Self-awareness would be pretty important in a situation like that, but also not taking it so personally that they did this and maybe embarrassed you, you know, to some degree.
And I think in general, as we're talking about this, I know we're talking about office settings and man's world and meetings and this, that, the other thing. I think it's really important in relationships too. I mean, all of these things that we're talking about can be brought into every aspect of our life. Truly.
When you talk about people that are close to you in your life, though, just like a lot of other things, they're the people that get sometimes the worst of you.
That's what I'm saying, is that's why even more importantly to pause. I mean, these are the people that we cherish most in our life.
So like, as I'm saying, young Jay, my son, I'm like, I know, and this kid is so sweet. I talk to him every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes he just calls because he just wants to say hi and ends everything with, I love you, Mom, every single freaking time. And it's like, I couldn't take 2 seconds to listen to what it was that he was saying the other day when he called because I was in the middle of something else.
Right.
I shouldn't have answered the damn phone.
There you go.
Yeah, I should not have answered the damn phone. But then he says I never answer my phone. So, I just said, nope, I'm going to prove him wrong. I will answer the phone.
So maybe let's just use that situation as an example, and bringing light to the self-awareness aspect. You're doing that right now,
right? And
next time it happens that you're in that situation, because I'm sure it probably will, what are you gonna, I'm not gonna tell you what to do. I need to ask you the question. So what will you do next time that's different?
I won't pick up the phone if I'm in the middle of something else.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to do that just because we want to get something done quickly. But I know when certain people call that's not necessarily going to happen. So I may let it go to voicemail and then go back later. If I am on the phone, I need to set aside whatever it is that I'm doing and pay attention to what my conversation is.
That's what I was thinking. Do we just stop the email, get up and step away and have the conversation? And I think too, and I'm only saying this not directed at your scenario, but I'm just going to use it as an example. Get up, stepping away, have the conversation, and just be transparent and say, you know what? I'm in the middle of something and I'm going to need to call you back. Can you give me just 10 minutes? And then I mean, what's he going to say?
Well, I mean, it happened today with him again, and I was in the middle of something. I picked up the phone and I said, can I give you a call back? I'm in the middle of something with a contractor that I was working with. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't let it go to voicemail. I just said.
It's like the human voicemail.
Yeah. Kind of the human
can I
one.
call you back? But I think it's interesting because all of these things we're talking, like I said, talking about corporate, social set, all of the outside stuff, because that's where we have to be more on our toes, if you will. And really, I think it's important to have the self-awareness and the pause in these situations with all of our personal relationships, our friendships, our family members, our,
those people you like.
Well, why can't I think of the right word?
I don't know.
Like in our marriages, our personal relationships, our family relationships, our friendships, all of those things, because these are the people really that we're closest to, that we should be really giving our more intimate time and attention to.
But they're the ones that get the short end of the stick a lot of the time.
Right. So even more so, I think, because we're going to do that out in the corporate setting and in the social settings. I think we pay attention a little bit more. We kind of know how to act and we do those things. Whereas at home, that's not, to your point, it's the short end of the stick a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And might kind of yell at my son or say something very strongly to my son in not the best way, and maybe rethink that. And I've actually gotten better at this as I'm getting older and learning to pause and step back and listen to others that are close to me before I interject and give my 2 cents, if you will, or continue with the conversations. Yeah.
That's called active listening.
Yeah.
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 That is definitely, what do you call that? That's a skill. That's a skill that you possess. I feel like you possess that skill.
So I'm
giving you a compliment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It made, because I told you yesterday, how I was up since 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, we never did get to talk about that.
So without giving too much detail, my car was out all night and I didn't know it was going to be, right? And so when I woke up at 4 in the morning and it wasn't here, there were all kinds of, there were text messages and phone calls and right. So when the person that was driving my car finally got home, we had a conversation. And I have to say, I'm thinking about that conversation and I handled myself completely different than I would have even 2 years ago.
Is it because you had time to process what you were going to say?
No, I think, that could be part of it. And actually, no, because a lot of the things that I said, they came to me in the midst. I wasn't even sure if we were going to have a conversation. Okay. When he got home. So it's my son. So everybody knows.
Isaac's in trouble.
And it actually accomplished so much more because he was feeling heard by the things that he actually said. And I acknowledged him and gave my feedback and what I thought. And of course, he hardly says anything. So of course, he's quiet and listening. But the outcome of that conversation was so much better than it could have been had I interrupted or interjected or talked over or jumped to conclusions, things like that,
Sure.
without hearing full and complete thought processes. So it was good. I don't enjoy those conversations, but I did in the aspect of the outcome,
Right.
if that makes sense.
No, because you feel like you handled it well.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
sometimes conversations can be super delicate.
Yeah.
And if you don't handle them well, then they go south.
Yeah.
And if they go south, it affects so many different things.
Yeah, real quick. Then nobody's saying anything or wants to talk to anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's times when, I mean, there's a couple of people I know that are, again, both elderly, but have, I think, had these issues that we're talking about, where one is talking, the other one's not listening, or one's trying to say something but doesn't know how to articulate their thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use their words. And so it's perceived one way, and then feelings are hurt. And as it stands, then they don't talk to each other anymore, because the conversation, they really weren't probably very respectful of each other's opinions and thoughts at one point or another. And it goes both ways.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes those are the relationships that you end up just moving on from because you can't get anywhere with them.
Right.
Or there's folks that, I mean, I can think of through the course of my life that every conversation ended up being kind of divisive.
Mm-hmm.
So why do I talk to that person all the time when I walk away feeling like crap?
Yeah. Nobody
You know?
wants to feel like shit when they're done talking to you.
No, you don't. You want to feel like someone's either heard what you've said, they've supported you or given you feedback and helped you, you know, the reality check of, yeah, you really were kind of a bitch, you know, or yeah, you really could have handled that better. So hearing it from an objective third party definitely puts things into perspective for people, because we don't see things the same way. When it's, especially when we're talking about ourselves, we don't see things necessarily from another person's perspective. It's going to be from what we think we did or didn't do, you know. I think we talked about active listening. One thing that is so powerful to do when you are getting ready to respond to someone and what they're saying, or if you have something very important that you want to get across and clearly, is just pausing for a moment before saying something, instead of jumping right in to whatever it is as a rebuttal response to what someone's saying, or not thinking through what it is that's on your mind. If you take that moment and kind of pause and collect your thoughts, I think that little teeny bit of silence really does resonate with people and kind of sets a tone for whatever it is, especially if it's a really tough conversation that you might be having with somebody.
I think it's important too that if you're unsure maybe of what they're saying or what they're trying to communicate, or you're just not understanding, or maybe you weren't listening, to be sure and get clarity before you are trying to answer whatever it might be, or before you interject with whatever your thoughts are.
Right.
You want to make sure that you do have clarity, that you're understanding what they're saying. If you don't,
especially if there is an expectation that you provide input, because you can't really provide input if you don't have all the facts.
Right.
I think that's so important. And the other thing too is just call it out and say, you know what, I'm sorry.
Well, just like you're like admitting
just apologize. Just like, I'm lame. I wasn't listening.
Yeah, that was on me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. By the way, there's going to be a phone call I'm making after we record this to the person I was talking to today, because I value that person a lot and I value their input and I value what they have to say. But clearly I was not following through on that, you know, when we spoke yesterday. So anywho, just something to think about.
Yeah. Apologize if it's necessary.
Yeah. So keeping your chin up and really thinking through what it is that you want to say when you have something important to say is a good way to kind of start conversations. Social settings, if you are an introvert, you may have a lot of difficulty with carrying on conversations that are considered small talk, or even small talk conversations that blossom into other things, other conversations, because you're just not comfortable with that whole thing to begin with. But reality is, unless you avoid everything, you know, you're going to have conversations with people at one point or another. So decide, are you the listener, or are you the talker, or are you a combination of both? And I think the best approach would be to have a combination of both of those skills. But communication is probably one of the things that we all have on our I need to get better list.
Hello, Walls.
Hello, Walls.
Hello, it's me. The other guy sang it better. But
wasn't he talking about a girl or something?
I have probably, but you know.
But we're going to take it and
all
put
the
it.
songs. Yeah. We're putting our own twist on it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope you guys have been able to gather something or really think through what your style is and what you can do to improve for the people that you love and for the people that are in your life from a business perspective or, personal, whatever's going on with you, because we can all benefit from being better on this topic.
I guess we discovered that I'm a listener.
Mm-hmm. I must be a talker. I am kind
You're
of a
multitasker.
I'm not a good multitasker. As I got old, I used to think I was really good at multitasking, but you know what? I think that is not true.
Well, we do multitask the podcast.
Yes, we do.
Out on all the socials. Mm-hmm. So make sure you check us out. Do us a favor and go check out YouTube. We're getting a lot of our episodes uploaded there. So all of them in one spot. And of course, you can listen to it on whatever platform you love to listen to your podcasts on. We are on there. And then as well, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all the socials. Check us out, download it, like, and follow. We would appreciate the support.
Much.
Thank you so much. And until next time, everybody.
Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.